Just so we're clear, this is the story of the Kenneth Hahn State Recreation Area in Baldwin Hills.
Right.
But to start, we have to go to the way early days in a sleepy Pueblo town of this park when it wasn't a park and it was just land, which is really just a park that doesn't have a government ID badge. That's the only difference between a park and just stuff. The area is called Baldwin Hills because way back in 1875, our old pal Elias Jackson Lucky Baldwin bought all the land, seeing absolutely no value in it other than grass for his cows to graze on.
Hell yeah.
And then he died, and 15 years after that, his family discovered oil on this land like some regular hillbillies from Beverly, and it was off to the races, which is also a place he built a San Anita racetrack. That land was and is located on top of what's known as the Inglewood Oil Field.
Okay.
In 1924, Standard Oil's Discovery Well number 1 on this field gushed. Greg, it just gushed. No, gushers sound really good right now. And by August 1925, there were 147 wells there across 1,180 acres on this land, which helped make Southern California into one of the world's biggest oil producers. And we've kind of talked about the oil days of LA before, and I'm sure we'll do a better job in the future. But for the sake of this story, all we really need to know is that oil and the money that came with it during these days was so important to the city that they had zero regard for the environmental nightmare that oil was creating around town.
Okay. That's something that's said at the beginning of Road Warrior, I think.
It was an oil nightmare. It was the best of days. It was the oiliest of days. Oil was being illegally dumped into the sewers, and the ocean off of the coast of LA was just slick with oil. That's what Los Angeles, it was the reverse Road Warrior. It was too much oil. And that total disregard for the environment went hand in hand with how the city felt about parks at the time. Right. The general sentiment by the LA government around this time was that LA didn't need parks because the land was beautiful enough as it was.
And it'll stay like that forever.
Is that a Lululemon? There were mountains, there were beaches that they were dumping oil into. And compared to the cities of the East Coast, each house had its own yard, which was basically their own personal park. So nobody really needed to ever leave the house to enjoy nature, was how they felt. What do you need to go hang out in some communal park when you can go to your little 4-foot backyard patch of dirt that you have?
Everyone has a small patch of oil in their backyard?
An oil derrick in every backyard.
That's my promise to you, the American people.
You can just plug your car straight into this oil derrick. Just fill it up for the whole family.
And drag it on a trailer behind you.
Then in 1930, some seer of the future predicted that someday all the natural wonders of LA would be paved over. It was Joni Mitchell. With developments. So maybe it might be a good idea to try to preserve some of this land. And that was when the LA Chamber of Commerce brought in the legendary landscape architects Frederick Olmsted Jr. and Harlan Bartholomew, like we once talked about, to come up with plans to preserve the natural beauty of the city. They brought them in. They're like, I foresee bad things coming. Let's try to stop this now.
There's a bad moon coming, and that's another musician.
They recommended a lot of things, including preserving the Baldwin Hills area, but it was the Depression and there was oil there and everyone wanted money, so they ignored this. We're not going to, you want us to stop making money?
It's the Depression. I don't know if you're getting it, but what we're depressed about is money.
And you know what makes us happy is oil.
Drinking it.
But after a few decades, the city couldn't ignore how much it had expanded, the whole entire city, and grown, and what that meant not only in terms of what they had to provide to this growing public. Between the 20s and 50s, a lot of houses were being built in the Baldwin Hills area surrounding this oil field, and it was becoming something of a fashionable neighborhood. Then when the restrictive housing covenants were struck down in 1948, all the middle and upper class black families that had been forced to live in South Central for all these years got out immediately. And many of them moved to the nearby Baldwin Hills, which was infinitely nicer, and they could afford it, and it was legal, and they could be there, so they went there. Why
all good reasons to do that.
No, I'd like to stay in South Central.
I see it turning a tide eventually.
Even nicer was that all those nasty white people got scared and left, so they had this whole place mostly to themselves. There was white flight just leaving Baldwin Hills. It became a black neighborhood, and they set up a really nice community that by 1980 had kind of become the cultural hub of black Los Angeles, Baldwin Hills. But back in the 1940s, when this neighborhood was just starting to change, the city was thirsty, Greg, and not just for oil, not just for some unrefined oil. It had grown so much, once again, that there wasn't enough water for everybody once again.
Hello, Owens Valley. Why aren't you picking up? Why don't you pick up your phone anymore? Owens Valley.
We just want to borrow something.
Yeah.
Their answer to this, another dam, even though one of their other ones had already collapsed.
Oh my God.
To make this, they needed a relatively undeveloped part of town that was also at a high elevation so that the dam could let gravity ravish it. And Baldwin Hills had two things going for it. One, hills.
Yeah.
The northern ridge of Baldwin Hills is 500 feet above sea level, which makes it the highest point in all of southwest Los Angeles.
Okay.
Hills. Second, because of all the oil production, it was pretty much undeveloped except for a bunch of oil derricks because drilling for oil was more profitable than real estate was at the time.
Right. Okay.
So all there was, if they were to take this land, they would have to just get rid of some oil derricks rather than we've got to displace 4,000 people.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So the DWP bought part of this oil field in 1947 and started construction on one of the most perfect metaphors for global warming the city has ever seen. It was open for business in 1951, this dam, just 3,500 feet northeast of the oil field, and it was 232 feet tall and 650 feet long.
Damn.
And the city had a little bit more water for the time being because of this dam. But soon there would be too much water.
Oh
Greg.
no, what happens?
The city of the damned. If
The hills of the
dam
damned.
episode.
The hills have dams.
The city of the Baldwin Hills of the Damned.
Thank you.
A catchy title that is going to shoot us to the top of the iTunes charts. In 1954, the oil wells in Baldwin Hills had started providing diminishing returns.
Okay.
It was harder to get oil out of them, so Standard Oil needed to come up with new ways to just squeeze the land dry. They just wanted everything, and they want all of that dinosaur goo. They just wanted all of it that they could get. What they came up with was called high pressure water flooding, which is where they'd shoot salt water into the wells to push up the oil. And this is basically the same thing or an early form of fracking, I think.
Boy.
I don't really know what fracking is, but it seems like it's basically the same concept, except maybe a little more refined.
Okay.
Rather than just like stuffing salt water in a blunderbuss and shooting it into the earth. They tried this out on a few of the wells and it was getting good results. So in 1957, they did it to all the wells on their oil field. Great results for Standard Oil. And as we all know, when the oil company wins, we all win.
Right. This
episode brought to you by Exxon Valdez.
Look at how all shiny the animals are now.
Just when you thought a duck couldn't get any cuter. What's great for oil company is great for Dawn soap sales. Unbeknownst to them, all of this drilling that they had been doing for years had forced the underground oil pool to expand out of the area that they originally knew it to be under, and the reservoir and dam being so close, that meant that it expanded underneath the dam without them realizing.
Oof.
And now this new method of pumping drained these new pools, and that left an underground maze of empty caves right underneath this dam. We're getting back to the descent. Basically, it was just like an ant hill. Like when you look at one of the ant things and you're like, oh my God, why are they bringing all the corpses down there? Like all those little tunnels. That's what it became like under the reservoir.
Oy.
These changes started becoming noticeable on the surface as early as 1943, but they all just looked past it. Of course, but they brought it up and then Chevron gave them like $4 million. And like,
I'm just going to leave my briefcase full of $4 million just right here.
I must have been wearing my dam's about to explode glasses when I looked at it today. I'll put on my regular glasses. I'll put on my Chevron glasses. By 1957, these changes had clearly created a new bowl shape on the land that was not normal, with the ground sinking as much as 12 feet in some of the places. That same year, a surface fault started to show, which was about to make things even worse. This was the Newport Inglewood fault, which was the same one that had caused the Long Beach earthquake in 1933, but this particular part of it was previously unknown to them, and it was only 1,350 feet west of the reservoir. But Standard Oil knows best and decided it wasn't strong enough to do any significant damage, so they ignored it and started doing even more water fracking, and between 1957 and 1963, 8 more fault lines became activated because of this new water flooding method.
God.
But they were just making the profit margins, Greg.
I finally can add another floor to my yacht. And you're going to tell me I have to stop?
My yacht has its own yacht now.
I can't even, my son's yacht, I can't even get that off the dock yet because it's so big it's illegal.
The yacht that we go to the bathroom on needs new floor. It needs new marble floors. But the method was working, so they opened up even more wells and pumped even more water down there. Meanwhile, in the neighborhood around the dam, they kept building more and more houses and more people started moving in. Like progress just kept pushing forward despite the fact that they were all like like balancing on a rickety ladder. But then in 1963, troubling stuff started happening. Like there was water and oil starting to leak out of the ground. Oof. But Standard Oil said, it's fine.
Oh my God.
Then came, and you know that when I give you a specific date, it means something bad happened.
I was thinking the same thing today. If he gives me month, day, year, I'm like, oh, someone's not doing good.
So then came December 14th, 1963. It was a Saturday at 11:15 a.m.
Even worse when you give me the day of the week.
Okay, it's bad when I give you month, day, year. Day of the week, this is something that a lot of people suffered. But when I give you the time that it happened, this is a catastrophe.
Unavoidable catastrophe.
At 11:15 a.m.
Oh my God.
Workers on the dam noticed that the water in some of the pipes had started draining and that there was also a small crack. There's that small crack I promised earlier. Right. Not just saying that because we're on Zoom. A small crack on the dam had formed. Okay. What they didn't know at the time was that some sort of minor earthquake had collapsed some of those underground caves that had been formed by the oil drilling right underneath the dam. They didn't know that, but what they did know was that something bad was about to happen. They immediately started the emergency draining of the reservoir, but that process took 24 hours and they knew that this was going to burst long before 24 hours. They put out an evacuation order for the entire neighborhood in the path of the reservoir, and the police went door to door warning people, and within 4 hours, almost 8,000 people all the way up to Jefferson were evacuated. Whoa. KTLA news helicopters were circling overhead covering what was happening, which is believed to be the first ever airborne news coverage ever done on TV, and they captured live what happened next. Man. Here's a second time. At 3:38 p.m., that little crack gave out and turned into a 75-foot wide hole in the wall of the dam, and out came 292 million gallons of water rushing out 50 feet high, wreaking destruction through the entire neighborhood, gushing, here's the gushes again, gushing north between La Brea and La Cienega and heading west into Bayona Creek. It ripped through houses. It caused mudslides. People were stuck on rooftops. It flowed for 77 minutes until the reservoir was completely empty. And what it left behind was 65 homes destroyed, 210 other homes and apartments damaged, 6 inches of mud on the ground, and 5 people dead. A couple of whom apparently washed into the store at La Cienega at what is now Obama Boulevard and is now at the Target. That's what I read. I don't know if that's what I read. Like a body or two just like came in on the water into what is now Target. One guy was killed in his car when he got washed into a ditch, and one guy had a heart attack when he was driving and a 50-foot wave of water came at him.
Understandable.
There was over $12 million in damages, some of which the DWP compensated victims for, but don't worry, the oil fields were completely unharmed.
I was so worried that our profit margin would be dented.
Yeah, they built an even stronger dam in front of the oil derricks just to make sure.
Yeah.
But if it hadn't been for the people acting fast to evacuate the neighborhood, the death toll would have been catastrophic. Like all those people could have died if they hadn't acted quickly. Dorsey High School became the base for people looking for help from the Red Cross, the Marines, the Salvation Army, and the Boy Scouts, who all came to help, which is like little Marines, really.
I've said that often, that I want to join an adult Boy Scout, but it turns out it's just the Marines.
From the hills of... Oh, wait, they don't sell cookies. Those are the Girl Scouts. I was gonna make a whole American anthem song about Girl Scout cookies, but sorry, America. It's the Boy Scouts. All they make is popcorn. In 1966, LA sued the oil companies responsible for this, which was settled out of court in 1970 for a mere $3.9 million. Oh my God. But this did lead to the DWP once and for all phasing out urban reservoirs, replacing that water supply with underground water instead. So now this land that used to be a cow field, that used to be an oil field, and now used to be a reservoir just stood unused until 5 years later, a man happened to be driving down La Cienega and thought to himself, let's turn this big empty space into a big empty space with my name on it.
Sounds like a pretty good deal.
Enter Kenneth Hahn. Okay. He was born August 19, 1920, right here in LA after his dad moved the family here from Canada because he had respiratory problems, which I have to assume meant tuberculosis.
Yeah.
He and his parents and 6 brothers lived at 5931 South Flower Street in South LA and was an LA boy through and through. Like this, he's Mr. Los Angeles. And in 1937, he opened a gas station station at Gage in Maine with his older brother, but then he attended and graduated from Pepperdine in 1942 with a degree in political science. And then World War II hit and political science degrees had to be turned into bullets. He had joined the Navy right after Pearl Harbor. So the second his educational exemption was over at graduation, he shipped off, spent 4 years in the Navy, and became a lieutenant.
Bold. Sorry to interrupt. It's pretty bold to hear everything that happens during Pearl Harbor and be like, I'm going to join the Navy. You could have joined any of the military services.
Well, the Navy isn't the Navy the one who got cut?
Yeah,
got hit?
They're the one that got hit. And to see everything that happened in Pearl Harbor and be like, I want to join the Navy. I'm joining the Air Force.
There's openings.
Please continue.
I'm sorry, I'm not a coward like you who wants to be in the sky away from where the action is.
I'm not going to let that happen to me. I heard the news that day on the radio.
I heard
you're not going to get me like
today.
that.
Oh boy. Nice try, Japan.
Yeah, I'm going to be in the sky.
You know, those things that you use to attack the Navy. I want to be up there also. So he became a lieutenant, like you never will be, you coward. They attacked the Navy while I'm joining Canada. When he got back, he was ready to redirect that big lieutenant energy into what he always wanted to be, a sleazy politician. But Kenneth Hahn was anything but. He was not a sleazy politician. He ran for city council in 1947 and was teaching political science and American history at Pepperdine at the time. So he told his students they could either do a term paper or canvass for him. And if he won that district they were canvassing in, they'd get an A, which is kind of sleazy, but that's the last sleazy thing he did, I swear.
All right, that is kind of sleazy, but you know, you need a street team.
Who likes term papers?
You got me there.
Unpaid internships are a problem in this world, but they get people elected. In 1947, he became the youngest person ever elected to the LA City Council at age 26 and started a very long career as a genuinely good and progressive local politician. This is a pretty good man. I'm not sure at which points in his career he did these things, but some of his accomplishments: helped bring the Dodgers to LA, which my dad hates him for, helped found the Music Center, which my dad hates him for, designed the county flag and seal.
Oh, wow.
Not the Rastafarian one, the county flag, which is basically it's just like blue and it says County of Los Angeles. He's like, look what I made.
Yeah. I picked a font. Took a couple days, but I picked a font I like.
He added the emergency phones on the sides of the freeway.
Oh, wow. That's a big deal.
He made it so that paramedics were allowed to cross city lines within LA County. Okay. He raised taxes to fund transit projects. He lowered bus fares. He got the volume of ice cream truck bells lowered.
Boo. Suck it, Hahn. You suck.
I thought you said he wasn't one of those bad politicians. Crank it up. I want to hear the entertainer.
I want it to be louder than sirens.
Is there a fire or is it ice cream time? Like nobody's pulling over on the side of the road because everybody's running to go get a piece of ice cream that looks like Tweety Bird.
It has the elements that arranged correctly would look like Tweety Bird. Unfortunately, this one does not look like Tweety Bird.
It has some crazed ice cream artist recollection of what Tweety Bird looks like. He proposed LA should be its own state. Okay. He proposed a pipeline to bring water to LA from Alaska and helped build the sports arena. When he was elected to the County Board of Supervisors in 1952, he was also the youngest person ever to do so at age 32 and eventually became the longest serving member of the Board of Supervisors ever, serving 10 consecutive terms from 1952 to 1992. For a total of 45 years in the local government between this and his time on the city council. Half a century he was
helping run the show.
Helping lower the volume of ice cream trucks a little bit every single year.
Monster.
That same year he was first elected in 1952, he appointed Gilbert Lindsay as his deputy, making him the first black deputy in LA history.
That's great.
Against the pressure of the other supervisors who told him that they don't do that.
Wow.
Lower the volume on them as well while you're at it. And that was just the first instance of what really makes Kenneth Hahn most memorable, which was his respect and dedication to helping LA's black community at a time when nobody else in the government was on their side in Los Angeles, or really the country. When Martin Luther King Jr. came to visit LA in 1961, Kenneth Hahn was the only elected official to greet him, not only in Los Angeles, but in all of California.
You're
He's
kidding.
the only person who welcomed him.
That should probably probably be written down somewhere for everyone to read.
As you want a copy of this?
Yeah. Can you cut that little sentence off and tape it to the wall?
We should bronze my notes and put this around town for everybody to remember.
We should leave pamphlets at City Hall.
He was referred to as a pothole politician because he addressed the specific needs of his constituents, many of whom were black. And even though he didn't have a flawless racial record, because he later defended the police chief after the Rodney King beating, but black voters loved him. He won all of his re-elections by a landslide, sometimes even beating out black opponents. Like, black people chose this old white guy over a black candidate because they trusted him. Like, they knew he would be on their side. Even the politicians who didn't like him copied his style in trying to fix the specific problems of their constituents, which I thought is what all politicians were supposed to do, but I guess not. He was also very savvy as a politician and made friends with pretty much every U.S. president during the 45 years that he was in office. Even that one.
Even Jimmy Carter.
Even Mr. Peanut himself. In terms of parks, Hahn felt that city money was being wasted on building new jails and hiring more cops, and felt that it would do more good building places like parks and playgrounds, especially in neighborhoods that the city was neglecting. He said, "It is much wiser and more economical to spend money constructively in providing our youth with good parks and playgrounds than it is to be constantly building more jails, juvenile halls, and detention camps, and adding police, probation officers, and judges." Basically what I just said. Right?
Yeah.
I said it better.
No, I like the second way you put it.
Put that on a plaque also, me saying what he did.
I like what you copy and pasted a lot more than what you actually said. So,
like, I'd copy and paste. I typed out that quote that I was reading.
My computer doesn't do that.
I removed those keys just so I wouldn't be tempted. He was responsible for over 30 parks being built in South LA and naming them after prominent black Americans. And this was before the civil rights movement was even in full swing. He was doing this. He also helped bring the U.S. Department of Agriculture's summer nutrition program to these parks, as well as building over a dozen public golf courses, 18 public pools, senior centers, and after-school programs. All of these opening ceremonies attended by local black leaders who he put in the spotlight. He was like, "Don't thank me, thank your local politician." Thank you. Everybody, please go out and thank your local politician today.
Go line their pockets, please.
Go give to whatever big corporation is lining their pockets. The city kind of came around to his way of thinking after Watts in 1965, because they kind of started to see that maybe if there were more parks and programs and opportunities in black neighborhoods, there might be less crime. So when Kenneth Hahn drove by the old dam site that day, a few years after it collapsed, it all kind of clicked for him. Baldwin Hills at the time had 0.31 acres of park space per 1,000 people, as opposed to 31 acres per 1,000 people in other suburban parts of LA. So it was exactly where a park needed to be. He started setting money aside to make a park there in 1968, but it wasn't until 1976 that the city bought the land to do so. And then not until June 26, 1982, that the ground was broken on construction, which the ground already broke once, but this time now it's in a good way.
Now we're all wearing life jackets.
When the ground was turned from a slight crack into broken, this new park was 138 acres and it cost $27 million, which was not a lot for a park because the land was undeveloped and thus cheaper. Again, the reason for that being the same reason it was such a prime place for a dam. So the same old drilling that had destroyed the land eventually made it the perfect place for land to be preserved. Like, it all sort of came full circle. A lot of pain and slippery ducks along the way, but it eventually came around. If it hadn't been for the oil, all this land would have been turned into housing decades ago. There was no objection to it on any government level. The only objection came from Burma Oil, California Southern Oil Company, Shell, and Chevron, all of whom were furious to be losing out on potential oil money, none more so than Chevron, who had asked that no mention be made between oil drilling and the dam breaking ever. Like, let's never say that was the problem.
Wow, oil companies, the enemy of the people. It's good whenever we circle back to that.
Let's just say it was hippies did this.
Yeah, let's say it was an oopsie doopsie. Nobody looks into that legally, that it was an oopsie doopsie.
It's a loophole that we found. A loopsie doopsie. The park opened November 14th, 1983 as the Baldwin Hills State Recreation Area and was at the time the 5th largest urban park in the United States. It's also the oldest park in Los Angeles. Did I mention that?
I have proof too.
The area that was the dam is now known as Janice's Green Valley, named after Kenneth Hahn's daughter Janice, who is now on the county board of supervisors herself. And it's also like a frisbee golf field.
Okay.
Like, people just play frisbee golf or whatever they call it.
I don't know what frisbee golf is, but
it's like frisbee
added
with
it?
sticks. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what these yuppies do over in
Baldwin Hills.
The western part of the park was actually the site of the first fully realized Olympic village ever built that was made for the 1932 Olympics. It's now called the Olympic Forest and has at least one native tree from each of the 140 countries that came to LA for the 1984 Olympics.
Wow, really?
So it was involved with both Olympics and is now just an area that you wouldn't know. There's the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Tree Grove. That's the spot where everybody takes the picture of downtown with the snowy mountains in the background. That's where it happens. There's a fishing lake that's restocked once a month. There's a lotus pond. There's incredible views, and it would make a really great fort. There's 2 baseball diamonds, a half basketball court, a sand volleyball court, 8 large barbecue pits, 60 small barbecue pits, over 7 miles of trails. It's open daily 6 a.m. to sunset, but you have to pay to park on the weekends, which I think should be a crime. In the early 2000s, LA actually started caring about making more parks. So in December 29th, 2000, 68 acres were added to the park of land that had been slated to become a giant apartment building. Chevron even shockingly ended up donating 200 more acres of former oil land to expand the park. And today it's something like 400 acres, I think, which is weird. It's like at the end of a movie from the 40s and like, you know, the banker that had been mean to them the whole time comes and like, I can bring you a little bit of money.
Yeah. What's the mean old man in Mayberry?
Mr. Pot. Oh, no, I'm thinking of...
It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. I kept on wanting to call it What We Do in the Shadows. I just simply must have some human blood. The Inglewood Oil Field is still producing both oil and lots of earthquakes in the area, but that's a problem for another episode. But this park was really a victory for nature in a city that historically does not care about parks, and also a victory for the community, which is mostly people of color, that was fought for not only by Kenneth Hahn, who the park was renamed after in 1988, but politicians of color as well that were fighting by his side. It was a big shift in the park history of LA and an environmental victory for a part of town that has not seen a lot of environment to work with. So go take a walk in the park and bask in the glory of a place that once caused human suffering at the Kenneth Hahn State Recreation Area.